Good morning, Radio Luis. We are Gioele and Paolo behind the camera, and today we have the honor to interview the member of the European Parliament, Ondrej Kolar. So, thank you for this interview, for this opportunity.
Thank you very much.
I would like to start with the first question. From your experience, how can you mitigate an international crisis from the diplomatic point of view?
Oof. That's a tricky question. I think the best way to mitigate a crisis, an international crisis, is not to allow for the crisis to arise. Actually,
Okay.
By adopting such steps and taking such steps that would not allow your opponents to actually create a crisis or let you fall into a crisis. Now that's very challenging and very hard. And then when it comes to the crisis, then of course it's very important to persist and prevail, to keep to your own standards, to keep to your own thoughts, and try to be as firm as possible. Because when your opponents see that you are getting weak, they always use the weakness, And this is what has happened actually with our position to Russia. They have learned over the years that we have become too weak to stand for almost everything that we value, And they have created a crisis. And if it hadn't been for this crisis, we probably would never have woken up, Now, I am happy that the EU has realized that it's actually really necessary to stand firm, to show our opponent, in this case Russia, that what we do, we really mean, Because, as I said, if you show a weakness, then the other side always uses it, Since the beginning of the crisis that we are currently going through, meaning the Ukrainian war, Europe has been very firm. Europe has shown Russia that what it does, it really means. And we have even taken concrete steps and concrete measures against Russia. I'm not saying that they all work. I'm not saying that we are being very firm in everything when it comes to sanctions, for example. There is still a lot of work that we need to do on making the sanctions really working, to the extent that we need them to work too. So, to sum it up, in order to mitigate any crisis, I think that you need to stay who you are and work hard on the things that you want to actually deliver to the other side in order for you to come out of the crisis as the winner.
Okay. And speaking of what, I noticed that in the debate, it's always the EU should do something, the EU. But the current international framework, for example, the international organizations like UN and so on and so forth, are they actually useful to deal with such issues or not, in your opinion?
You mentioned the UN. The UN is obsolete.
Okay.
The UN was created in 1948, if I'm not mistaken,
Bretton
and it
Woods,
hasn't changed since. And if you took into account, for example, the Security Council, it's like an aging man who lost his Viagra, I'm sorry to say it like this, but they are unable to do anything.
It delivers the message.
It's like they are the body which should overlook the world security and be actually the guardian of the world security, Not allow any escalations, not allow wars to emerge. And then when it comes to it, they should be the ones who come and settle down, bring the sides together and mitigate, be the mediator, That doesn't happen. The Security Council is blocked by the aggressor, because they have the permanent seat there. Unless the institutions like the United Nations come to a realization that they need to reform, nothing will happen, nothing will change, And we will have new organizations that will be emerging, like the BRICS, for example, which is now gaining on importance and power because it's being attractive. It's attracting those countries who have had the feeling of falling behind those who were playing the big games for the 80 years now, So I think that it's up to all of us to actually come to the realization that things need to change and actively start working on the things to change. I don't know if the EU now has the power to play the decisive role in this. I'm afraid not. EU, in order to be again one of the leaders of the free world, needs allies, and we need to actively look for these allies. And maybe it will end up in the creation of a new union in terms of the United Nations,
Okay, a new Bretton Woods, a whole new...
Exactly,
okay.
the options are open, but we need to actively look for those who share our values, who share our point of view. There are countries like this all around the world. We cannot only focus on Europe and our closest surroundings. We need to look into countries and regions like the Indo-Pacific. We have emerging powers there, which, if we don't make ourselves attractive enough for them, they will fall for someone else. When it comes to the new American administration policy, with them stepping out of US aid, and leaving many regions in the world, they're creating gaps.
Yeah.
And these gaps will be filled in by someone else. Now, if you look at the slogan, "Make America Great Again," America was always the greatest when it was actually dispersed all over the globe.
An empire, we can say that, an empire.
Yeah.
An empire.
And I think it's our duty now to target those gaps that have been created by the United States by stepping out of US aid, by stepping out of all the programs they have created over the past, and identifying those gaps which are of utmost importance for us, where we can or should actually challenge and combat countries like China, like Russia, which also have interests there. So it's all about influence. It's all about these global games and all that. If I may call it like that.
A game of chess or a big Risico.
The Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones.
No, it is like that. I mean, and if we don't succeed in finding new allies, if we don't succeed in making new coalitions and new unions, then we are lost.
Yeah, I agree also on the point that we should be responsible of our actions. We should decide our destiny, our fate at the end of the day. And we spoke about mitigate a crisis. We spoke about the fact that we are virtually alone dealing with these issues. But now, is the conflict Russia-Ukraine at a point of no return? Because we saw the EU policy shifted from let's speak with Russia from rearm Europe. Are we to the verge of a final decision on the matter or not, in your opinion?
Well, I would love to say that we have already made the final decision, that we don't want to do business with Russia as usual.
Okay.
But I cannot be 100% certain and sure about this, because you still see tensions inside the EU, and you still see individuals and political parties, political movements, and even countries who say that we actually shouldn't support Ukraine that much, that we should leave it to Russia, it's their sphere of interest, And these are people who have some kind of a fetish for the dying world, I would say, for the past. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of the concert of superpowers. It's,
in which sense?
I mean, that's something that worked in the past when the world was different, in the 19th century.
Okay.
When the world really was divided into a
into slices. Okay.
And this is something that many people still see as the only functional system for the world to exist. I don't think so. I think that the world should really exist on the cooperation of different nations, of unions of nations, and all that. And if we now decide to leave Ukraine to the aggressor and say, well, Russia is too strong for us to compete with, they have all the rights to own Ukraine because Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, and if we go further in the past, Russian culture emerged from what's today Ukraine, then we actually accept the play that Russia is playing. We accept the way of thinking of not only Russia but also China, that if you want something, you just point at it and you take it without the others opposing you. And I don't think this is something that we should accept, because it then could affect any of us. when we say that protecting Ukraine means protecting Europe, and that Russia won't stop in Ukraine, I think it's quite clear, you know, and it's enough to actually listen to what the Russians say, what their representatives say. When Vladimir Putin says that his dream is to return NATO into the borders in which it was before 1997, that the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century was actually the break of the Soviet Union, and that he would love to recreate it or give Russia the influence it has lost. He's only telling us what his dreams are and what he wants to do, what he intends to do, and what he is trying to achieve in Ukraine.
He's very honest about it.
He is being honest with us, you know, and he's showing us that he will not stop, that there is nothing to stop him. He will use all the power, all the force that he has available to achieve his goals. Now, I think that it's our duty to oppose this, you know. Aggression is not the way how to solve problems in international relations, you know. So it's only about making us stronger, making us survive actually in today's world, you know, and not giving up on the way of life we live, because I'm pretty much certain that we all like the European way of life, you know. We like our comfortable lives and living our comfortable lives. We like the peace that we live in. We like we like the prosperity that we have at the European continent, in the EU, you know.
We are afraid to lose it.
And of course we're afraid to lose it, you know.
But,
and by being afraid, we become vulnerable, you know. And that's what Russia is counting on. So.
Yeah. Also, we don't understand how a nation could say, just leave Ukraine alone when it makes sense that the next nation to be invaded can be theirs.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's a huge bias, maybe. I don't know how the sentiment is inside the hemicycle, inside the parliament, if such reasoning makes sense also there, because from the outside it's a different dimension. There are different powers playing the game, but there was any member of the European Parliament that brought up this idea that, okay, maybe we should avoid Ukraine being taken because the next are all of us.
Well, there are a lot of parliamentarians who say this. I think that the parliament actually, if you look at how the parliament is now constituted, I would say that there is a great majority for supporting Ukraine.
Okay.
Of course, there are MEPs who say that supporting Ukraine is useless, you know, that we should actually give it up, you know, to Russia and all that. But I think that the main problem is that the parliament, and maybe not only the parliament, but also other institutions, are unable to sort of translate this to the public, you know?
Okay.
We understand what needs to be done inside this institution. We vote for the resolutions and everything, you know, and it's pretty clear. And I'm not saying that there is not a minority of members who say the quite opposite.
And that is democracy. It's okay.
Of course. But then when it comes to sort of transferring this message and explaining why this is being done to the public, I think that we are a bit losing on that, you know, because if you look, and I've been getting questions throughout my time here in the I-Village, like, for example, why should the EU enlarge? Why should we expand? You know, we have our own problems that we should face and not care about other countries, you know? And I always say, well, this is exactly the problem, you know? We are not even able to explain why the EU should be bigger. What are the positives of that, you know? And now we are trying to convince people that helping one country which they don't understand why they should help is really necessary and important, you know? So I wouldn't in particular aim and focus on what's going inside this house, because I'm pretty comfortable about what's going to happen there. But I think that our main task should be, again, focusing on how we deliver to the public and stop, you know, thinking that we only need to speak to people when it comes to election campaigns.
Okay.
No, we need to talk to them through the whole mandate. Explain, be as plain as much as we can.
I think this event is an opportunity to understand what's happening.
Course.
And we also had the pleasure to attend an event in the hemicycle about democracy. when the daughter of Alexei Navalny spoke and gave us a speech about her experience and the situation in Russia. And it's quite clear that that situation will spread in Europe, but it's very strange how the majority of people does not understand it, and it's a communication problem. And from the outside, we cannot understand how you can bring to us this idea and how to fight this information war.
Exactly.
Because there is two propagandas crashing together and no one understands nothing.
And I think that one of the problems actually is that many people say or fail to actually realize that disinformation actually exists.
Okay.
I have an experience with politicians from my country, from the Czech Republic, who openly say that they are not able to define disinformation. You know, they are not able to say what disinformation is and if it even exists. You know, and because they are not able to define disinformation, they don't have any description of disinformation. It's useless for them to actually speak about the topic and to do anything about it. You know. Because in their perspective, it's enough to tell the truth. But in today's world, when we are overwhelmed with media, who can say what the truth is, you know? We sometimes tend to even say that our own opinions are more than the truth, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that actually investing in media literacy is very important. Teaching people how to get oriented in this flood of information that is coming at us every day, you know? What's important, what's not important, what you can leave out, what you can filter, how to filter it, how to compare the information that comes to you, you know, how to do fact-checking, how not to get lost in this, as I said, flood that's coming at us every day. And this is something that I think many countries are failing to do, you know. People are lost, people are falling for easy narratives because, of course, it's much more comfortable to fall for something that's easy to explain, you know. And I think this is something that really we need to work on a lot, because otherwise we can then send as much money to Ukraine as we want, but unless we are
Nothing will
convinced that
change.
it's the right thing, it's pretty useless, you know.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think that's it.
Okay.
Okay, for the ending of the interview, we would like to greet Radio Luis with our motto that is Ciao Radio Luis!